Acts chapter 9, if you want to turn there with me this morning, Acts chapter 9. Picking things up where we left off last week. We're continuing this big series we're doing, talking about what does it mean to be the church by God's definition, God's blueprint that we find in the Bible. So as you may remember, where we're going to pick it up is verse 32. But verse 31 says, okay, now that this guy named Saul, who was heavily persecuting the church, got saved, and that threat is gone, verse 31 says, hey, since that threat's gone, the church throughout the area enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened. They lived in the fear of the Lord, encouraged by the Holy Spirit. It increased in numbers. Okay, so then Acts kind of zeroes in on one of the leaders named Peter. Verse 32 says, as Peter traveled about the country, he went to visit the Lord's people who lived in Lydda. Okay, now I don't have my screens with a fancy map, but basically you have Jerusalem, and Lydda is just a little bit north of it. And it's a really important city because of that. There were a lot of roads that went through there, and to this day, that's actually where Israel's international airport is. So it's still a hub of transportation. But the cool thing about this verse that I don't want you to miss is since it was so close, when persecution was happening in Jerusalem, that's probably where a lot of Christians ran to. And so it's really neat that Peter didn't just stay in Jerusalem with the big church idea. He's like, no, I'm going to go minister to individual people. Right? I love that. It didn't matter how big the church got or how fast it grew. Peter, as a leader, didn't get caught up in that mass media mentality. Every single person still mattered to him, and he was willing to travel to go check in and make sure they're okay. All right, so verse 33, it says, there in Lydda, he found a man named Aeneas, who was paralyzed and had been bedridden for 8 years. Aeneas, Peter said to him, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and roll up your mat. Immediately Aeneas got up. I love that too, because as we've seen before in Acts, when Jesus does a miracle through the apostles, they don't even hesitate to give him the credit, right? And that's just huge for us in our culture. We love to be about us, and look what I did. Let me take a selfie. No, he's like, it was Jesus that healed you. Give him all the credit. That's awesome. Verse 35, all those who lived in Lydda and Sharon saw him, the guy that was healed, and turned to the Lord. So it actually had an impact. Not just healing this guy, but saying Jesus did it. Everybody's like, wow, this Jesus guy must be something. So they turned to the Lord. I love that in Greek too. Turn to the Lord is actually this word in Greek that means literally to turn around, to make a U-turn. And so basically the idea is they didn't just change their mind about Jesus, like, oh yeah, he's pretty cool. They actually changed everything. They did a complete about-face in military language, where they stopped going their own way and committed every part of themselves to Jesus. They totally turned around in life. It's very cool. All right, verse 36. In another town named Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name is Dorcas. Both of those mean gazelle, by the way. Tabitha is Aramaic, Dorcas is Greek. Says she was always doing good and helping the poor. Okay, which again is another major note for what it means to be the church. I love that. The key word, always doing good and helping the poor. It was just the church's way of life to do good and help the poor. It's part of who we are as Christians. Jesus tells us in Matthew 25, he takes it personally how we treat people like we're going to serve today. And we always want to be sure we treat him well by loving others. So verse 37, about that time she became sick and died, though. And her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Washing the body of a deceased person was a custom of Jews and Greeks back then that would prepare them for burial. And usually Jews would then bury the body the same day the person died. But placing it in the upstairs room was something they usually do if burial was delayed for some reason. So verse 38, Lydda was near Joppa, about 12 miles apart actually. So when the disciples heard Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged them, please come at once. So Peter went with them. When he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and the other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent all of them out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, Tabitha, get up. She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord again and again and again. So obviously that's an important thing to note too, that not only did Jesus enable people like Peter to heal others, but he actually enabled Peter to bring someone back to life, which is huge. And like other miracles, obviously that creates an opportunity to talk about Jesus as a result of what happens. But you know what's also interesting about this passage is what Peter did here sounds a lot like something Jesus did, you might remember from the Gospels. Like in Mark, I'll just read it to you real quick. In Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 21, it says, when Jesus is doing his ministry, when he had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. And he pleaded earnestly with them, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so she'll be healed and live." So Jesus went with them. And as Jesus goes, a woman in the crowd touches just the edge of Jesus' cloak and gets healed, and you might know that story. And while Jesus is still talking to her, some people come from Jairus' house and say, your daughter's dead. You don't need to bother Jesus anymore. But overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He didn't let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said, "Well, this commotion and wailing, this child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, think about that, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up," and which is so interesting because think about it. He only took Peter with him. He says Talitha kum, which means, "Little girl, get up." Peter, in the original language, actually says Tabitha kum because her name was Tabitha. So one letter different, same exact scenario. I love that. Immediately the girl stood up, began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished, and it goes on from there. The point is, man, the church followed Jesus, like literally, didn't they? We say follow Jesus. I mean, he literally did exactly what Jesus did. One letter difference in what he said. I just think that's cool. So, all that just to say, notice what we can learn about church from that part of Acts chapter 9. They're always helping people, right? It's who we are as a church. Peter individually ministers to people. This Tabitha lady was helping the poor, always doing good. When she gets sick, Peter heals her. Peter heals Aeneas. He tells them that Jesus did it. It's always this thing about, man, the church is always helping out, helping the poor. It's part of who we are as the church. Then it says Peter stayed in Joppa for some time with a tanner named Simon. Okay, now what's a tanner? Like he owns a tanning salon? No. A tanner back then was someone who treated the skins of dead animals, which, if you know your Old Testament, means that guy was unclean by Jewish standards. Yet Peter stayed with him. Isn't that interesting? So the guy that would have been totally shunned by the local synagogue, Peter says, "I'll stay with you." Man, this is just mind-blowing stuff for that culture. And that's the idea. Because as Jesus says, man, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I didn't come to call perfect people, but sinners to repent. So the early church followed Jesus, and a huge part of that was always helping others, being there for those in need. It's just such a perfect passage for today. It just kind of worked out that way for our serve day. So thank you for being here, because what you've already done and what you will do is who we're called to be as the church. This is a big part of it, showing people Jesus by what we do. But my challenge for us this week is don't leave it here. Don't think, well, I did my Sunday thing. Okay, but what about the rest of the week? Who do you know, and if you're watching at home, you too, who do you know this week? You probably know at least one person who's going through something rough right now. How could you be there for them this week and maybe even show them Jesus' love and his compassion before next Sunday happens? People are they tell you in seminary as a pastor, people are the most open to Jesus when they go through something rough, like a divorce, a death in the family, a medical issue, moving, even marriage sometimes, and having a kid. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. They need someone to be there to show them Jesus. Now, one thing I hear a lot as a pastor, and in my job at the aquarium, because of what I do there, is I just don't always know what to say. You ever have that thought, well, this person's going through something rough, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. All these guys are coming in, I don't know what to say. Well, this is pretty cool. I actually found this some time back. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association has this thing called the Rapid Response Team. And so when there's a shooting somewhere, or there's a hurricane right now, these guys show up just to minister to people. And this is actually the card they give their workers for what to say and what not to say to someone who's hurting. And if you're watching at home and didn't get one, send me an email. I'll send you one for free. But as it says, we all face storms in life. People go through stress and heartache with the death of a loved one, natural disasters, divorce, illness, job loss, other traumatic experiences. When someone is hurting, it's common to hear Christian friends say things that are heartfelt and meant to comfort, but in reality fail to help and in some cases even add hurt. One of the best things we can do for the heartbroken is simply to be a loving presence, listening and praying with him or her. So here's some things to never say, okay? What not to say. I know how you feel. Why is that a bad thing to say? And if you've said it before, don't tell me. But why is that a terrible thing to say if someone's going through something rough? Anybody?
Because each situation is individual.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you have literally gone through what they went through, it just never helps. It's just, I understand how you feel. Really? Do you though? As it says, people in the midst of grief feel no one could possibly know the depth of their unique pain. So you offer comfort when your words acknowledge that, right? Another one, something to say instead, I can't imagine how difficult that is for you. I can't imagine how hard this must be. Stuff like that. Another one, what not to say. You doing okay? Or how you doing? These common conversational questions may suggest you aren't asking for a real answer. Right? You're at the store. How's it going today? Well, does the cashier really want to hear your life story? No, he just wants to sound like he cares and scan your stuff and get you on your way. How's it going? Good. We don't really usually want an answer to that. So when someone's going through something rough, you doing okay? It can sound like, I hope so, because I don't really want to deal with you right now. Right? So instead, a good thing to say is, how are you holding up? Right? Just a little tweak can make such a huge difference. Other stuff not to say. Okay, and imagine someone just had a miscarriage. Okay, put these in that context, and you'll see why these are terrible. You'll feel better before you know it. Oh my goodness, never say that. You'll get through it. I'm sure it'll never happen again. Why is that bad to say? Because you're not God. Yeah, you don't know. Don't cry. Be strong for your family. Oh my goodness, come on. One of our favorite phrases at SEC is, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. It's not okay to stay not okay. But you're going through something rough. It's okay. Give yourself permission to grieve. One of my best friends in this entire world has a degree in counseling, recently lost someone he cares about, and his emails to me are like, oh, it's okay. And I had to remind him, dude, you got the degree, but it's okay to be human and actually grieve this. It hurts to lose something, right? You'd feel better if you'd stop crying. Oh, I'll tell you, newlyweds never say that. Never say that. Be happy for what you have left. Sometimes someone will lose a child, and people will say, well, you have other kids. But they mean well, okay, but it's just not good, okay? God must have needed them in heaven. Okay, let's just never say that, okay? Thank God you have other children. There it is. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Okay, that may be factually true, but you want truth and love together, and sometimes keeping your mouth shut's better. Don't let it rob you of your joy. Oh dear. Any personal stories that compare their loss to some other grief or loss? I know how you feel. I once lost a car in a car accident. That's just like losing a child. No, just shut up. That's bad. Anything that tells the person how to feel, don't do that. Instead, respond to how they feel. Flip it over. Here's some other good stuff to say instead. Where were you when that happened? Ask open questions. This was horrible. Were you there when it happened? Where were you? What was it like? Can I take a moment to pray for you? If a family's lost a loved one, talk with them about that person. Share memories, especially little things you remember. And you can say the name of the person who died. Sometimes people freak out. Oh, I don't want to cause trauma. No, they're trying to process it. That will help them. Offer Bible verses. There's some good verses there. And then just on the bottom, other tips, just be willing to listen. Be comfortable with silence. We always feel like we have to fill silence. It's just not true. One memory I always think of when I'm teaching on that, when my grandma passed away, we had the worst funeral director ever. Sweet guy. I don't know if you remember this. But at her casket side service, right? Our pastor at the time did a great talk, and everyone just kind of sat there. And this guy comes up, he's like, take all the time you need. I'm like, that's very nice. He goes, and he's like, stands up and starts talking. There's just nothing to say at a time like this. I'm thinking, dude, shut up, just stop, just leave it quiet. And he just goes on, and I'm like, I know you're trying to be comforting, but there's sometimes, just be quiet, It's okay to be quiet, be comfortable with silence. Avoid distractions. Demonstrate God's compassion. Help with any next steps. Someone's going through something rough, they might need a meal prepared. They might need a ride somewhere. They might need someone to watch their kid just so they can have 5 minutes to take a nap. I don't know. Always be prepared to share God's hope. So keep that with you. This has been super helpful to me as a pastor, so I know it'll be helpful to you. And that is today's little mini devotional sermon. Be the church. Huge part of the church is helping people who are hurting. There's how to do it in a really good way.